In an hour, your plane should touch down at the resort town. 2 weeks of sun, sea, and sand await you. You're going on holiday. Suddenly, your plane starts losing altitude. The earth and sky switch places. The flight crashes. End of story. Or is it? It was just a dream. A simulation. Pilots train in simulation cockpits like these. Now, when you see an empty screen instead of the ground coming up to meet you, it's obvious that it's not real. But when the plane began to fall, the fear of death felt real all the same, right? What actually is real anyway? Everyone has asked themselves these questions, and at some points even doubted the reality of reality. But further reflection always leads to disturbing conclusions and unanswered questions. And therefore, mostly people play by the rules. And they do not go beyond the boundaries of what is allowed in this game. This game has no name. This video was created by the SumSub verification platform, but more about SumSub in a bit.
It's sort of like having an Apple Watch or a Fitbit, replacing a piece of skull with like a smartwatch.
Here is one of the richest people in the world demonstrating the possibilities of Neuralink technology. A chip has been implanted in the primate's brain, with the help of which the monkey plays ping pong on the screen using just the power of thought. For this, he gets a fruit smoothie. The technology that Musk so strongly believes in should help disabled people, for example, to control a biomechanical prosthetic. The monkey obviously doesn't think about the mechanisms that allow its mind to change the image on the monitor. It doesn't feel the implanted electrodes. It just happens organically as it thinks. I think, therefore I am. René Descartes' fundamental principle is well known. It is one of the main thoughts with which modern European philosophy began. The French thinker proposed a thought experiment known as Descartes' demon. How can we prove that everything we see, feel, and imagine isn't just a delusion of a powerful evil spirit? And the answer is we can't. The only thing that we cannot be tricked into believing is that we exist, even if our entire consciousness is literally placed in a jar. The possibility of the existence of our consciousness in isolation from the physical body and even the physical world has long been a source of inspiration for writers of science fiction. But more recently, scientists have actually managed to restore some brain functions after its removal. The brains, it's true, were that of a pig's, but still. But why should we remain slaves to biology? We can go one step further. For example, to digitize our entire consciousness. Brain activity is essentially a huge number of weak electrical impulses, ones and zeros. We already have a pretty good idea of how our brain works, so why not create a virtual copy of it on a machine?
The digital brain is a simulation of human-like processing that can interact with you.
Konnichiwa, I'm Yumi.
So far, this seems impossible. Scientists say that the brain is constantly in multiple different states. It cannot be described by our current understanding of mathematics. And here we return to the Cartesian demon. If we understand that life outside the body is possible, at least in theory, how can we be sure that we are not already in a simulation? And here's another amusing argument, that we are in the Matrix, because even the highest quality photo can be enlarged to only 1 pixel, all the way down to a square. Listen.
In the real world, we can zoom down to see bacteria and viruses, then to the level of atoms, quarks, and superstrings, which are the bits and pieces that make up the whole image of reality. But like a computer screen, our reality too has a limit.
Do you remember?
How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain.
But this has been derived from an idea from thousands of years ago. The original is Plato's cave. Millennia before Wachowski's film, the Greek philosopher had already formulated the Matrix paradox. He proposed a thought experiment. Several prisoners are chained up in a cave and have been since childhood. Their eyes are directed at a wall and there is a fire burning behind them. People and animals pass in front of the flame, carry objects, but the inhabitants of the cave can only see shadows on the wall. For them, these shadows make up the whole world. At some point, one prisoner is released. He goes outside and sees that the shadows are just reflections of real objects. Returning to the cave, he tries to tell the other prisoners about it, but they don't believe him. They think that he has gone mad.
Boy, have you lost your mind? Cause I'll help you find it.
So the next step is to ask the question, what if there is no world outside the cave? And the wall, the flame, the shackles and Plato himself live in our consciousness? How can we prove that the world really exists? That it exists somewhere else besides in our heads? Solipsism asserts that you can't. This is a philosophical trend that argues that it's impossible to refute the idea of a phenomenal world, a universe that is born only from experience. When we look at the shadows on the wall, they are real, but as soon as we look away, the shadows cease to exist in the universe. A tree falls beside you. You hear the sound of it falling, and you can clearly say that a tree has fallen. A similar tree falls on a remote desert island, but there's no one around to hear it. Reality appears only when it has a subject, someone who can perceive this reality. You don't hear the sound of it falling, therefore the tree did not fall, and hence the tree does not exist in this world. What if everything we feel and perceive is just part of a simulation? If we don't hear a falling tree on the other side of the earth, why are we so sure that the echo nearby is real? Meet Nick Bostrom. No tinfoil hat, no crazy look in his eyes. The Swedish scientist is probably the main modern theorist of transhumanism, a researcher of the dangers of artificial intelligence. But perhaps his most famous work is the 2003 article, Are You Living in a Computer Simulation? The text is considered as a reference reasoning about the likelihood that we will all see a machine-generated collective dream simulation. By the way, Elon Musk believes in Bostrom's theory. In short, Bostrom put forward three basic assumptions, or as they are sometimes called, the theory of three doors. The first is that simulation is impossible, because no civilization will be able to reach such a high level of development. Most likely, it would destroy itself before reaching that point. The second is an advanced civilization. If it is able to develop the technology to simulate the world, it wouldn't use them for religious or ethical reasons. And the third assumption is that we are almost definitely living in a computer simulation. It argues that the belief that there is a significant chance that we will one day become posthumans who run ancestor simulations is false, unless we are currently living in a simulation.
You can show that if the first two possibilities do not obtain, then there will be many, many more simulated people like us than there will be non-simulated people like us. In other words, almost all people with our kinds of experiences would be living inside simulations rather than outside them.
But what technologies does a civilization have to possess in order to simulate the whole world? How much power would a computer need? After all, the simulation would have to render not only the visible reality surrounding us, but also every neuron of every brain that has ever lived. This concept is also called the Matryoshka brain. It's a huge computer the size of the solar system. Here's what a computer megabrain might look like. The concept is beautiful but unrealizable. Firstly, the creation of a megacomputer would require more resources than humanity currently has at its disposal. And there are serious questions about whether such an object can exist in principle. And secondly, this solution is a bit excessive. Why render everything at once? Remember how computer games work. While the object is on the periphery of the scene or far off on the horizon, its shape is roughly represented, and it's only as the character gets closer that the details are becoming visible. Most likely, the simulation we are living in tries to economize energy in some way. We know that the world is made up of atoms and molecules. We know that there is bacteria everywhere, but we can only see them in a microscope. The megaprocessor doesn't need to constantly render the entire universe. It generates only the area on which our consciousness pays attention. This is the principle of quantum superposition. A picture of reality will exist as long as it has an observer. It's a technologically provable solipsism. And if humanity can learn to create such simulations, we'll be able to spot the glitches in our reality that prove that we ourselves live in the Matrix. This is the 2016 game No Man's Sky. It is literally an infinite number of procedurally generated worlds, with each one appearing only when the player decides to explore it. A complex universe where thousands of stars, moons, and players exist simultaneously. And all this complexity, the entirety of this brave new world, was created by just one studio. Perhaps we are also shown what the microcosm looks like with its bacteria and viruses, only when our character decides to look through the microscope. Or that pilots see rendered runway lights when it's landing time.
Right. You just need
enough of the world that they see around them.
That they see around them.
Right.
So you want to start digging, and
that's so funny.
And haven't put the Earth there. There's a flag that goes up in the programmer, and they say, need more Earth. So they put Earth beneath you while you can keep digging.
Let's go back to Bostrom. Such computers would be virtual machines, a familiar concept in computer science. Virtual machines can be stacked. It's possible to simulate a machine simulating another 12 machines, and so on, in arbitrarily many steps of iteration.
So now that world evolves, and they develop computing power.
Right.
And they say, we want to play video games.
So now we're going to make a world.
So then they make a world, and they have sufficient computing power that they invent to create a whole universe within their computers.
Okay.
And then
they make a world.
And then they make a world all the way on down.
Well, you get the picture. Once again, it's this principle of the Matryoshka doll. Each simulation created will sooner or later reach a level that allows it, in turn, to launch its own virtual universe. Every creation is a creator for someone. But for whom are all these worlds created? Who will populate them? And most importantly, why would an advanced post-human civilization run lots of simulations?
Why do you think your people made me?
We made you because we could.
Can you imagine how disappointing it would be for you to hear the same thing from your creator?
The superhumans of the future developed an artificial intelligence so great that the machine was able to construct a whole living world. Bostrom, naming a civilization that could potentially launch a simulation, Ancestor, among other things, suggested that the purpose of such a project could be to study one's own past. Would you refuse to see in real time how the heroes of antiquity lived, what they talked about? Caesar, Macedonian, Plato. The civilization of the future just wants to see its roots. Another option is for entertainment.
There's nowhere left to go. Nowhere. Except the oasis. A whole virtual universe.
That is, our world is not a simulation for us, but a game universe where our advanced descendants take part. This raises a disturbing question. In what capacity are we living in such a simulation? As NPCs? Therefore, most of us have such boring and eventless lives. We're just background dummies at the next FIFA stadium. Tell me, do you feel compassion for characters in The Sims? By this logic, the real participants in the events, that is, independent minds playing a simulation, can be famous people. Well, you know, the whole RPG world revolves around the main character. Until Geralt went to look for Ciri, nothing happened. Why would we need Skyrim without the main character and his scream? Therefore, take a closer look at famous people. Some of them don't even make much of an effort to disguise themselves.
But it is going to bother you because you're human, and I was human. I am human, still.
Or perhaps, the civilization of the future came up with this imitation of reality in order to live in the past. Imagine that humanity has reached the height of technological advancement, but the planet's resources are depleted. It was not possible to find a new world suitable for colonization. Our descendants are tied to the dying Earth. Why not immerse everyone in the simulation, choosing for it an era preceding the post-human one? That is, perhaps our physical bodies are thousands of years ahead, but our minds live in the analog 21st century. But there are arguments against it. Here is one of the best ones.
As you know, like Google Ngrams has a way to type in a word and see how interest in it declines or rises over time, right?
Yeah.
So you can just type in a year and get the answer for that. If you type in a particular year like 1900 or 1950, you can see with Google Ngram how interest in that year increased up until that date and decreased after it.
Yep.
And you can see that interest in a date declines faster than does the population grow with time.
That is brilliant.
The man who formulated this paradox is Professor Robin Hanson, but we'll come back to him later. So, what if the opposite is true? We found a distant, potentially habitable world after all. A planet 100 light years away. A huge ship is racing there at sublight speed, and all the potential migrants on board are immersed in sleep. And so that these inhabitants of the interstellar ark would not be bored in an eternal sleep, it was turned into a simulation. That is, we will all wake up one day, instantly forgetting about our earthly lives in order to set foot on another planet. But our world is objectively too far from paradise. If you really come up with a recreational dream, it could be nicer. And our reality very similar to, well, prison.
Wait, what do you mean, 3 weeks? If you just wait for just...
Let's imagine the distant future again. The value of human life and freedom is absolute, but nature won't change. People will break the law. And sometimes very seriously, but it will be impossible to execute them or send them to jail for the rest of their lives. And then the criminal gets sent into the simulation. To us. From a world without wars, diseases and inequality to our world, here. It's quite possible, depending on the severity of the crime, they change the era, the country, the initial opportunities. There is another possibility. This whole simulation is for you. Yes, you. All other participants of the Matrix are bots. You are the only living participant. But you've been here too long. When they talk about malfunctions in simulations, they often recall this episode from The Matrix about déjà vu.
Oh, déjà vu.
By the way, when was the last time you experienced this feeling? Doctors still can't say exactly what causes déjà vu. In general, they say it's to do with a failure in the formation of short-term memory. The brain perceives a fresh, newly received impression as an old memory. But maybe this is a glitch. You see an event that you have already lived through, which was not completely erased during the next reboot of the system.
Tell us what you think of your world.
Perhaps the simulated world is not as big as we think. Distant countries, the moon, the Mariana Trench, do they exist? Or the whole world is enclosed in a small space, where the same plots are generated, which we then forget about. We're inside the endless seasons of The Simpsons. That's why the cartoon often predicts what will happen in the real the world. The internet would not be the internet if it did not assume that the show is a simulation, something like The Truman Show. But even the most advanced simulation is imperfect. Sometimes glitches more serious than déjà vu happen. Do you know what the Mandela effect is? The system is so advanced that it allows the participants of the simulation to see their own flaws. But anyone who points out the glitches in the Matrix is not erased, he is censored. Who believes these flat earthers, foil-clad contactees, or global conspiracy theorists? Belief in the unreality of the world is another law by which the Matrix lives. We need to doubt. You are dead, don't be afraid, follow the path further, is an approximate translation of an inscription left in an ancient Egyptian crypt. Then followed a detailed algorithm for how the afterlife double of the deceased can pass into the other world.
Clearly, I'm in a certain era with a certain kind of world around me, right? So either this is a complete fantasy or it's a past of somebody else in the future.
Professor Robin Hanson has written a modern guide for those who think they are living in a simulation. The guide appeared shortly after Bostrom's article. In short, if you might be living in a simulation, then all else equal, it seems that you should care less about others, live more for today, make your world look lively, to become eventually rich. Expect and try to participate in pivotal events, be entertaining and praiseworthy, and keep the famous people around you happy and interested in you. It's that simple. Even if we live in a simulation, there's nothing we can do about it. But even if we find, and someone may have found, a way out of the simulation, what awaits us on the other side? When the plane collides with the ground, it will be impossible to relaunch the flight simulator. To avoid interrupting the simulation, turn on the next video.